Hello, my lovelies. Welcome to another NACLO video. Today we'll be going over one of my favorites. This problem is called Set in Stone. It's from 2020, round one. And it's one of the harder problems of round one because it's 20 points. So usually on the contest, like once you get this problem, you'll be feeling really good about yourself. So great, let's get started. All right, set in stone. Old Persian, one of the two attested Old Iranian languages, was spoken between 600 and 300 BC. Amazing. So it's written in a writing system that uses wedge-shaped marks, So background information, it's fun to know, but usually not too relevant to our problem. It says, below are some words written in Old Persian cuneiform. On the next page are their transcriptions and English translations in no particular order. Okay, so that is interesting. All right, so on the first page, we see a whole huge mass of symbols. Don't get intimidated. I know it's intimidating, but there are tricks to these kinds of problems, so don't worry. I will dispel them to you guys. And on page 2, there are supposedly the transcriptions of each of the symbols on the top. There seem to be 26 of them. And we have the transcriptions and then the translations in English. Okay, so before I even look at the problem, there are two things I want to kind of dispel in general. So for NACLO problems, lots of times you're gonna run into either transcription problems or translation problems, and they are not the same thing, despite them sounding very similar. So transcription is like when you have a language written in some kind of symbols, like for example, in this problem we have like the cuneiform writing system, and then when you transcribe it, you're just basically going from this like symbol version to like Roman like words, like letters, for example, that we can read. And so there really is no inherent kind of like definitions you need to know. It's literally like a kind of pattern matching. You go from one kind of alphabet to some other kind of alphabet. And so that is one kind of problem. The second kind of problem is translation. And translation is when you have some kind of word and you need to use the meaning. And when I'm looking at this problem, they give us both the transcription, right? So symbols right here to kinds of like Roman like alphabetized words. And then we also have from like alphabetized words to the translation. However, in our entire problem, you don't want to look at the answers, it says determine the correct correspondences. So it wants us to look at the symbols and match it with the kinds of like Romanized versions of it. And so for the most part, it seems like this side, all this translation, is probably not going to be super helpful, just because like, you know, when we translate something into English, like the syllables, the word count, like the character count, everything changes. And so that isn't really relevant at this point. But they do give it to us. So it's probably useful at some point, but for now, what I want us to focus on is the fact that we want to determine the correct correspondences. And so we should really just be focusing on looking at the symbols and seeing how we can match all of these symbols to each of the transcriptions in like the Romanized versions. All right, great. So with that out of the way, let's continue on with the problem. Great, okay. So below are some words written in Old Persian cuneiform. On the next page are their transcriptions and English translations in no particular order. Note that one word can be written in, that was supposed to be an eraser. Note that one word can be written in two different ways. Okay, interesting. So they're also telling us one word can be written in two different ways. Why would they tell us that? It's probably related to the problem somehow. But yeah, we don't know. However, what I do notice, we're given these symbols, right? The cuneiform symbols, we have 26 of them. And if you look at here, we have letters A through Y. There are 26 letters in the English alphabet, A through Z. We're missing Z. And so what that means is that one of the symbols must be used, or must like two of the symbols must correspond to one of these. So one of these words has two kind of symbols. And so that must be why we're given the fact that one word can be written in two different ways. In other words, we're probably going to use one of the letters twice, if that makes sense. And so that's good to know. So in the end, we're not just like panicking because we have like two little letters or something. We already know from the get-go that we're going to have something extra. Amazing. Cool. So with all the background information out of the way, we can now start jumping to this problem. So, how the hell are we supposed to start with this huge bunch of letters? Good question. Good question. Whenever I see transcription problems, the first thing I think is, what patterns can I find? Okay, I see a bunch of symbols. Lots of them look kind of similar, like this guy and this guy look kind of similar. There are some really short ones. There are also some really long ones. So those are good observations to keep in mind. And if we look at these symbols versus the transcriptions below, so again, this side is the transcription and this side is the translation. And we really only care about the transcription at this point because we want to go from symbols to each of these words. And what I notice is the way we pattern match this, it can't be word for word. Notice how our longest symbols has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 symbols. Our longest words have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's pretty good. But like our longest word, HAKARAMC with a little thingy, IY, that has way more than 8 words. And so it's probably not like a letter to letter transcription. And so what makes most sense to me at this point is it's probably like a syllable to syllable transcription, because notice how we have like 2 symbols, right? And we have like ones that like asthma, I'm probably pronouncing it woefully incorrectly, but it has 2 syllables and like it's possible. And so it's very likely that this is kind of like a syllable based transcription. And when you're thinking about syllables, right, different languages have different ways of splitting syllables. Some languages split it like consonant, vowel, and then maybe, or they split by consonants, they only mark the consonants. Some languages only mark the vowels. So it's a huge mess. So we're gonna have to figure that out, but that's good to know. Our guess is that this is kind of like a syllable transcription. Something else we can also kind of see, we can't see right now, but we can probably figure out as we go, is we don't know whether these symbols are left to right or right to left. Different languages, there are no restrictions, right? So we just want to keep in mind that we can't just assume that languages go from left to right just because they might not. Some other important things I see when I mention consonants, vowels for syllables, notice there are some letters that don't really make too much sense in English, right? Like we don't have a little S with a little triangular upside down caret, but we're given that these are consonants. So we can, even though they look similar, don't get tricked by your English mind. S and S seem to be completely unrelated. They're just different ways of marking sounds probably. And we're also given that A, I, and U with the little line on top are long versions of their corresponding vowels. Why would they tell us this? There's probably some differentiation between A and A with the little bar on top. And so that's also kind of interesting to note just from the get-go. All right, amazing. And so that is all the background information I think that would be helpful for us. So getting on to the actual transcription. Oh my gosh. I'm as intimidated as you guys are probably right now. So my first thing is there is this huge long string of letters. And so maybe we should start here just because, it's usually the easiest to start from like huge ones or small ones because those kind of are like distinctive factors. And remember that the NACLO people want you to solve the problem. They're not trying to trick you. So, or they're trying to trick you sometimes, but like they want you to have a starting point. And so these are usually good starting points. So let's start with number 7. What words look weirdly long? I feel like what I see, L is pretty dang long, and so is X. So we can probably start with one of these. Something else I noticed right from the get-go is if I highlight this, here and here, they start and end with the same symbol. And so I can kind of rule out X. So I'm guessing that number 7 corresponds to L. Why? Just because I see the little A and A that you see here in alcalfacia, but that doesn't really tell us like whether the transcriptions are left to right or right to left. So we got a little bit of information, which is great. Now whenever we see like these little guys where we can guess it's some form of that long form A, and I can now cross that off my list. Great. So we have L for number 7. And something else that might be kind of important, other than looking at the lengths of the symbols, is to see if we have any like patterns within. And so I see 2 repeating things here. I don't really see anything repeating at the end of any word, which is interesting. But I notice, okay, if we look at F, for example, it has a very distinct repetition. If you look really closely, there is the I, S, and notice how like this doesn't really appear in any other word. But like this IS combination is pretty rare. I don't see anywhere else. And it's repeated exactly. So that might be kind of important. If we can find anything that's kind of like weirdly repeating, maybe at like the end or something like that, it could potentially be helpful. Oh, number 11. Okay, so let's look at number 11 for a sec. Notice how it also has these very 2 distinct repetitions. It's a little bit hard to tell with the symbols, but if you look long enough and pay close enough attention, what you'll see is that you have little like literal exact repeats, right? And it's 2 and 2. And notice how over here it's also 2. Oops, that's way too big. It's also 2 and 2. So that is pretty helpful right from the get-go. So let's take a leap of faith and just guess. Okay, we think that F corresponds with 11. Great. So let's do 11 as F. And now let's try kind of pattern matching. I think number 11 is actually great because what I've noticed, and what I hope you've noticed, is notice how like it kind of if we like assume that the language went from left to right, this would actually match perfectly, right? Because the ending is where the ending repetition is, and the middle repetition is where the middle repetition is. So great, we've come up with something big. These transcriptions go from left to right, and that is very important, right? We don't want to do it backwards. And so if we have I and S, we can also kind of come up with the rest of this word. So there's a little funny C, and there's a little PA. And remember when I mentioned how this language is likely syllable to syllable just because like the ratio between the number of letters there are and the number of symbols there are seem kind of syllable-like. So if we assume that, then we have this little C with the little marking, and it's capitalized, which is interesting. It said I remember it said somewhere about capitalizations. Capitalization transcription is not reflected in the Persian script. Okay, so that's good to know. But anyways, we have C and then maybe like PA, right? So consonant vowel, this is like one syllable, and that would give us the complete word. And that seems to match pretty well, so that's great. With number 11 down, we can go back to 7. Now we know which way it is. And I suppose I just naturally wrote the A, capital A first, but like in Akar Fasia, we didn't know which way it was. I just like arbitrarily put it there because English is like that. But now we know for sure that it's left to right, so we can kind of try matching. And this is going to be a little bit hard to match just because we don't really know what each letter corresponds to, but we did figure out that this might be the letter I, and so this might also be the letter I. And if that is the case, then we basically got till around here. And so now we have this Y left that we didn't really put in, so we could put the Y over here. And then everything else, there is still if we like kind of logically try to parse out each syllable, right? Fa would be kind of a syllable. We had as a syllable. K-A-U, it could go either way. It could be like one syllable, or maybe like it goes by each letter, or it goes by like consonant vowel, consonant vowel, consonant vowel. And so this is a little bit uncertain. But what we have to kind of, apologize about the sound outside, what we kind of have to take into account is that we don't really know, so we're just gonna have to guess. If the hunch is correct and we have kind of C, because it's like, you know, usually in English, right, like each consonant is its own syllable, so we can make a lucky guess that maybe, so C is by itself, and then we have Fa, and then Fa is over here, that's like one syllable, that's pretty intuitive. And then we have K-A-U left. So I'm just going to arbitrarily split it like that. It is very likely that it's some other way, but because it makes sense, right? You split by consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel. If there's just a vowel, you have that vowel as a syllable. If it's just a consonant, you just have that consonant as a syllable. That seems to match pretty well with our hunch. So that's a good way to go. Great. Okay, so we have those two down. And we're already quite long. It's already been quite a long time. So obviously, if you're actually doing this problem, you're not going to have so much time like I do when I'm just yapping and stuff. So you're going to have to like come up with these things relatively quickly. But for the sake of educating, we are taking this long. Great. Okay, and so now that we have these two down, it's kind of, you're just going to have to start searching for patterns, and that can usually take quite a long time. But again, the easiest ways to kind of continue from here on out, you could start looking for patterns that are similar. I'm going to start off by looking at some of the longer ones just because they seem more fun, and also like if I can get the longer words out of the way, I can kind of get more like syllables that I can start pattern matching with, which is pretty nice. And so the longest word after this L that we first identified was X. Ha, ka, ram, C, I, Y. And so if we look at these, pretty much the longest one that I see that's not number 7 is 25. So this one is pretty long too. And so let's just make a guess and see, can we pattern match X to number 25? Well, let's look at what letters there are in this. So there's this little C, and we already kind of found this letter C to be this syllable. Notice how like we have identified that, and hey, they're also matching, which is a good sign. And so do we see that anywhere? Oh, we actually do. We see a little C here. So that's, if that was a C, then the next two letters are the long I, are the long I and the Y. If it's the long I and the Y, does that work? Oh, it does. If you notice here too, this I and this I are matching, as is this I over here. So that is a good sign. And then let's see if we can match everything else. There's ha, right? I'm gonna just split it by like arbitrarily what I think it might be. Ha ra, ha ka, and then ra is a syllable, m is a syllable, like a consonant, consonant vowel, consonant vowel. If it's just a consonant, I'm just gonna classify it as its own syllable. If it's a vowel, classify it as its own syllable. And that seems to work pretty well. So let's try it. H-A-K-A-R-A-M. Okay. H-A-K-A-R-A-M. Great. Okay, that surprisingly matched pretty well. And is there anything we can fact check this with? Okay, notice how over here we have K-A. We also have K-A here, and they're the same. So we can be pretty confident at this point that we at least have 3 of these down, and that is pretty good. So let's mark 25 as solved. We're going to put 25 down here for X. And yeah, all right, let's now start looking for other patterns.